This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over some problems you may run into when you go to clean the filters on your route, or if you're a homeowner with a filter. I'll go over some problems you may run into when you're actually cleaning the filter. And these are common problems that happen out there with pool filters. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. For me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. One of the first issues you may have, and I came up to this problem actually because I'm doing some filter cleanings right now, is that you don't have your proper equipment or you don't have it actually ready to go. And so I have my cordless drill, of course, and I forgot to recharge the battery on that thing because I was doing a filter today and it just was running out of juice. So, of course, make sure you have all the equipment in order. So I have a check sheet that I go through when I'm doing the filter cleanings, and I have everything listed there. Of course, a cordless drill, charged, multi-torque socket sets, all that's in a bag, so that's all set. And then I have extra bolts for the clamps. That's really important to have a set of extra bolts for the clamps. The spring barrel nuts are important, and sometimes you get to one and you're having a problem, and I'll address those problems in a minute here. So carry one for the Hayward filters, the Pentair, and for the Jandy filters. Always good to have those extra parts. I have my silicone lube. Now I used to use the Boss lube, but it's harder to find, and so you just go into AutoZone and ask for any RV grade silicone spray. Walmart has some also, and you just pick up the RV grade silicone spray, and it works really great on the O-rings for the filter. And I find that this particular silicone spray will allow the O-rings to last longer, and they kind of breathe better with it versus the Magic Lube. Besides that, the Magic Lube is really messy. It gets all over your hands, it gets all over everything, it turns everything black over time. So it's not the cleanest thing. Now, the only time I would use the Magic Lube is if you're having a problem with the O-ring leaking, and I'll go over that also in a minute. You want to have spare O-rings on your truck for every filter on your route, so they can easily change that if you need to. And you also want to have, maybe if you wanted to be proactive and you have a lot of DE filters on your route, have spare grids that you carry for those particular filters on that day. So I like breaking up my filter cleanings to where I'm doing 40 square foot DE filters on one day, 60 square foot DE filters on another day, mainly because I don't have a lot of room in my truck to carry the grids. At one point I was carrying some of them in the back of my truck, and I had one fly out, and I was like, that's probably not a good idea. Also, the sun damages the grids very rapidly, so if you have them in the back of your truck, don't be surprised if you find the stitching or the top of the grids eaten away pretty quickly by the sun's UV rays. So they're not really great to have in the back of your truck. So kind of stagger your DE filters so you don't have to carry all different grid types. And you want to, of course, carry grids for the universal filters with the top manifold, and also some 4000 and 2000 series Pentair filter grids. Are different, and you'll notice the difference right away with those. Other than that, you may want to carry a spare top manifold if you think that's necessary. I also carry the air bleeder valves, or the air release valves, especially the one for the Pentair Clean and Clear Plus and FNS Plus, the air bleeder assembly. I've broken a few of those when I take the lid off the filter and I've had the lid tip over, or when you just go to grab it, you may break that. It's pretty fragile, so have a spare one so you can replace that. You also want to carry a rubber mallet so that you can tap the clamp when you're putting it back on to make sure it's tight. Basically, everything you're going to need. You want an apron or something to cover yourself so you don't get too dirty out there. And I carry one of those flexible garden hoses. Sometimes the homeowner's garden hose isn't that great. And then you can carry other accessories if necessary to help you with the cleaning. So have that ready to go and make sure everything is ready. And, it's one of those things where if you're prepared to do it, it's going to be a lot better than if you have to come back or put a part on or don't have the right tool for something. So here's some problems you may run into. The first thing you may run into is that you have a problem removing the clamp from the filter. So most filters will have the spring barrel nut where it's a compression nut, and you'll see the fact that it's on there tight when the spring is totally collapsed. You don't see anything through those springs on there. But a lot of times, if someone puts it on a little bit crooked, if they're not lubing it up, one good thing about the Magic Lube is that the actual threaded part of the clamp will actually fit into the Magic Lube tube itself. You can actually stick that on there and then pull it back out, and then you'll lube up the threaded part of the clamp very easily with a Magic Lube container. And this is something that you'd want to do, is lube up that particular part. You can spray silicone on there also, but if you don't lube it up and you're putting on that nut all the time, you're going to strip the threaded part on the clamp. And the clamps are pretty expensive. They range anywhere from $150 to $300 in some cases to replace. You want to make sure that you preserve those clamps, and the one part that wears out is a threaded part that goes into the nut. And so if you lube that up, you're not going to have a problem. So you may run into the case where you're trying to get that off. You have the multi-torque in the drill and it doesn't budge. And so then you start turning the drill and you hear it kind of squeaking, eep, eep, eep. And that means that the nut is on there a little bit off and it's actually stripping that clamp. You can get it off sometimes. It takes a long time. And then getting it back on is a total chore as well. So I found that sometimes just changing out that particular part, the nut and the spring, really helps get it back on. Sometimes not so much. So it's one of those things where at some point you have to change that clamp because you don't want to spend 5 minutes getting it on. Plus you're making it worse every time, and it may get to the point where it's almost impossible to remove the clamp from the filter. So if that happens, you can probably get it off to clean it. But I would recommend, if you run into a filter where that's on there and it's not moving, or you find that once you get it off, you're not going to get it back on because obviously it's too stripped and it's something that's going to be a problem, I would say don't clean that filter. Just tighten it back up and order a new clamp and tell the customer they need to replace the clamp. You can't guarantee you'll get it back on because it's actually stripped on the threaded part of that clamp. And usually that's not a problem. You order one, get that thing off, and that way you don't have to put it back on. And put the new clamp on, and you're good to go. It's a really easy thing to do, and you don't want, again, to take it off and have the struggle getting that nut back on. It's not going to be an easy task. Another thing you may run into along those same lines is when you're finished, you're trying to get the lid back on the filter, and this could be problematic. It doesn't fit right. You can't get it down right. Most of the time, it's because the O-ring is slightly stretched out and you have to change that O-ring. I wouldn't recommend changing the O-ring on every filter. The only filter that I would recommend changing an O-ring on every time you clean it is the Pentair 2000 series. These are the stainless steel filter tanks with the squat lid on top, and those are really problematic to get the lids on those sometimes. Now, there's a few tricks that I've learned over the years to get those lids on pretty easily, but the number one step is to change that red line O-ring every time you clean it. You're going to thank me for it later. It's not because they stretch out, it's just because it makes getting the lid on much easier with a new O-ring. So the way you work with that 2000 series O-ring or lid to get it back on is to, of course, change the O-ring on top, tank O-ring, spray it really good with lube, maybe use Magic Lube on these, and then put the lid on there. And then what you want to do is turn on the filter and let it fill up with water to where it's coming over the top. and then you quickly turn off the filter and then push down on the lid. And as that water is kind of receding, it's going to pull that lid right down on top, and then you put the clamp on and you're done. So that's the only filter O-ring that I change every time. The other ones should last a very long time, but if you're having trouble getting the lid back on, it's because the O-ring is worn out slightly, and changing the O-ring is the way to, of course, solve that. Now, sometimes you'll put the new O-ring on, put the lid on, and this has like a little drip leak. Sometimes that drip leak will actually stop over time if you have it lubed up really well and you have the clamp on tight. You'll see like a little drip coming out. And I've had this happen before where it's like, okay, this is a problem. It's dripping, and so I have to I have to take it apart and fix it. Or if you didn't replace the O-ring, replacing the O-ring usually stops that. But sometimes this happens with the new O-ring. I find this happens a lot with the Hayward filters. You put a new O-ring on and it starts to drip a little bit, and you lube it up and it still drips, and you're like, what's going on here? For some reason, the older Hayward filters don't seal really good. And when you change that O-ring, it doesn't fix the problem. And sometimes if you tighten the clamp really good, the drip will stop by the next time you're over there. It just kind of seals over time. But sometimes it's one of those things where you just have to work on it and maybe put another O-ring on, or just, sometimes I've gotten to the point where I just actually take the old O-ring that was on there and I turn it inside out. This is for the Hayward tanks that are leaking still. And you may try this if you have a Hayward filter that just won't seal. I'll take that O-ring and I'll turn the old O-ring inside out and put the old one back on. And I've had it seal pretty good doing that. It's just one of those things where it's a known problem with the Hayward filters. Pentair, usually you don't have a problem with the O-ring leaking, nor with Jandy. If you change it to a new O-ring, you have no problem. The only time I've ever had a problem with a Pentair tank with the O-ring leaking, even with a new O-ring, is when a customer had a crack on their lid, and it was a 4000 series, and they changed the top, left the bottom, and for some reason the mold of that filter tank didn't work and it just didn't fit well. But typically 100% of the time when you change the O-ring, lube it up, put the lid back on, any leaks will stop, any drip leaks will stop, and that's not a problem. So if you do put the tank back on with the old O-ring and you see a drip, chances are it's just slightly warped, or worn, I should say, not warped. You can have warped lids as well with the 2000 series filters, but that's a whole another issue. And you just want to put a new O-ring on, and that should solve the problem. Another problem is when you backwash the filter. I usually backwash them when I'm done with when I finish the filter cleaning. I put it in backwash to get anything that's left in the tank out of there. And sometimes you'll have a problem where you backwash it, and then if you have the push-pull piston, you go to close it and it's not going to go down all the way, and there's like water dripping. That's usually the O-rings in that piston. That means that they're worn out. So it's pretty simple. You just unscrew the top nut, and then you pull that piston out, and you change those two O-rings on there. And they're brand specific, so you want to carry the kit for the Pentair, the Hayward, and the Jandy pistons, so you can change those out with the correct O-rings. Again, they're manufacturer specific O-rings. I've had this problem recently too, where I have a multi-port backwash valve and I go to backwash it and then I put it back in filter and there's a little drip leak, and that will indicate that the spider gasket has a problem. And these are kind of a pain to change because you have to scrape them out, scrape the glue out, put a new one on. The good thing sometimes is if the spider gasket is on top, which I like these, the ones that have them on top, the top part, I just simply swap out the whole top part. It's also good because that top part mechanism tends to wear out really fast nowadays versus the older multi-port filters that seem to be more robust. And so if the spider gasket is actually on the top portion of it, just get the model number and order a whole new top portion and put it on there. It's much easier, and you get a whole new top for it. And it's not super expensive to change that out for the customer. Now, if the spider gasket's on the bottom, you have to scrape it out. Sometimes they're glued on there really good. Glue the new one in there, and then you're good to go. And that's something that is problematic sometimes. One little trick that you can do to kind of just give yourself some time in replacing it is to have a 1.5 inch or 2 inch ball valve. Carry those on your truck, and then just put it on the backwash pipe and then put it in the off position. There's not a lot of pressure, so you don't have to glue it on there. If you put it on the backwash pipe really well and just turn it off or close it, that'll stop the drip leak in filter mode, and it'll buy you some time to go out there and fix that later. Same thing with the push-pull pistons. If you have one that's leaking a lot, you can actually put a ball valve on the discharge. And I've done that with some 4000 series filters, where that the underneath it's really hard to replace those rotor backwash O-rings. You have to take the whole filter apart. So one way to solve that is just to put a ball valve on there and then leave it closed all the time. And so if there's a slight drip leak in filter mode, that ball valve in the off position will stop it from leaking, and there's no need to change that rotor on the 4000 series filter, which is really hard to do. The 2000 series is even worse, and they're super expensive, by the way, as well, to change those out. The ones on a 2000 series are brass, or not the plastic. So those are some problems you're going to run into. Another problem you may run into is that you'll see a leak at the drain plug. A lot of times that's because the O-ring is worn out. So carry some drain plug O-rings as well, and lube those up too. Sometimes you just need to lube it up and put it on tight, and that'll solve any leak from the drain plug itself. There's just a few drain plugs that are notorious for leaking. If you have a Jandy filter with a gigantic drain plug that you need to use channel locks to get off, those tend to leak more than others. And Waterway had a run of cracks right by the drain plug also, but that was fixed with their newer filters about 3 or 4 years ago. So if it's leaking at the drain plug, it's typically the O-ring on the drain plug that needs to be replaced, and that will solve that problem as well. And one note for safety, just make sure that when you're doing the filter cleaning that you mentally focus on the fact that the filter is not going to come on during your cleaning. I've done this before where I've been careless and I'm cleaning a filter with an automatic timer and I don't turn off the breaker, or I don't turn the dial past a certain point so it's not going to come on, where the filter actually came on while I was cleaning it. So this could be a danger. And also with the automated panels, I like putting it in timeout mode and not technically service mode, because sometimes I'll leave the pool off on accident. I've done that before. So if you have an automated panel, just put it in timeout mode and make sure that that's going to be off for 3 hours. So when you're cleaning the filter, it's not going to come on. The only time you're going to have a danger moment is when you're putting the lid on and you have the clamp and you're tightening it. And at that point, if that filter comes on and there's water in there, that could be very dangerous. One thing also that you may want to do to prevent that from happening, and this is like a secondary safety measure that I do at accounts, is I'll take the pump lid off as well. And this is a secondary safety mechanism. So if you do forget if you have employees, teach them to do this as well, because this will actually protect them. After you get the filter lid off, take the pump lid off as well. You're going to have to prime the pool anyway in most cases with the pump. So just take the pump lid off and let the water drain out. And so if the filter does come on accident, let's say you have an employee that's not paying attention and that does start up, well, with the pump lid off, it's not going to prime. There's not going to be any danger of the tank filling up, and you eliminate any kind of danger of the tank exploding and hurting you when you're putting the clamp back on. So the extra measure would be to take the pump lid off while you're doing the filter cleaning. Sometimes I'll be cleaning the salt cell at the same time, and that's also a good safety mechanism because you have the pipe off, the salt cell's off in the cleaning stand, and there's no way for the water to fill up the filter, and that therefore you have a secondary safety measure. But the only danger again is if you're putting the clamp on and if there's water in the tank and the pool comes on, that lid can blow off and hurt you. So it's one of those things where if you just take the right precautions, putting it in service and timeout mode, or moving the automatic timer and also taking the pump lid off, you're pretty safe out there. Nothing's going to happen. And even if the pump were to come on, I've had a Pentair system. It was an easy touch system where it was a weird with the old IntelliFlow pump, where it had this problem of just starting itself, even if it was in timeout or service mode. It was kind of a weird override, but simply I solved that. When I cleaned that filter, I just took the pump lid off. So if it had that glitch while I was cleaning the filter, I didn't really worry about it because it's not going to prime up and the filter tank's not going to fill with water. So those are a few things that could go wrong when you're cleaning filters out there. And of course, make sure you have all the proper tools in order and everything ready to go for your cleaning. And I like to bunch them up in March and then do the filters again September, October in my area, the larger filters that get a 6-month cleaning. And you may want to do the filters every 4 months as well. on your route. It just depends on how dirty the filter gets and how many filter cleanings you want to set up. But I do it twice a year, and it seems to work out fine. Looking for other podcasts I've recorded, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, there's a podcast icon. Click on that, and there'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,600 podcasts for you there. And again, if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Have a great rest of your week. God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.